Sweet.
Yeah, good. Right. Sean, hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Lewis. Thanks for having me on. It's exciting. We got a good setup here.
Yeah, fair play. So, when I interview someone, I think the context is very important, especially understanding where someone is now. Um, so I like to start at childhood. So, if I was a fly on the wall in your house, describe what your childhood was like, um, where you grew up, and everything around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think context is important, and a lot of the people who I've got to speak to, oftentimes the events that happen in their past define them today and how they act. I think mine was probably fairly conventional up until a certain age. Started off with quite a lot of opportunities, really. I was very fortunate. Grew up in a fairly well-to-do area. I mean, money was never a primary concern, but at the same time, we weren't super well off. It was kind of a middle income household. My dad worked, but my mum took a lot of care of us. So even from an early age, I remember kind of memories going back to 4, 5, and of fondness really, of being surrounded by good people. I mean, like back when you're that age, what you can kind of remember is a blur, or at least it is for me. But it was playing, it was playgrounds, it was having fun with friends and games and going around and enjoying the parties. And you progress through the school system, and I think I was always doing quite well in that regard. Again, I had my dad was had worked a lot of his life, so he had a lot of that practical experience. And my mum was quite well educated; she did her education in Russia. So again, I was as the first child, a lot of priority was put on me to try and succeed and give me the best opportunities. So I really kind of went from that area, and was given access to tennis, and I did football, and this was kind of going into my years 7, 8, 9. I did swimming, I did a lot of ice skating, and maybe that was from the Russian side because it is quite unique, especially to be a guy ice skating. But I had lots of opportunities, and I think I was quite fortunate in that regard. Went to a good school, had a really good time, met lots of really uh, nice people, and I think I was one of probably, and I know it's me saying this, but I was probably fairly comfortable speaking to people and being around people, and I was fortunate in that regard. Then kind of came, I suppose, those later kind of early years still. So 9, 10, 11, back end of secondary school, still doing quite a lot. Again, sport was really cool. So I remember every day after school doing an extracurricular activity, whatever it may be. Piano was also introduced, which I, to be honest, I hated at the start, but have grown to really love now. And I think that's the thing. I think when you're younger, you you don't necessarily have a say as much. Or at least I didn't. You just kind of get thrown into these opportunities, but it's as you kind of reflect on them, like I'm doing now, where you realise that actually they are integral and they're quite important. A lot of the stuff I've learned, a lot of the transferable and the soft skills have probably come from that sporting background. So kind of progressed through secondary school, which was great. And then I got to, junior school, which was great. And then I got to secondary school. And I think something dropped. I think it was the fact that it was completely new people. It was still in the location where I was from, so I did recognise quite a lot of familiar faces, but at the same time, there was quite a lot of unfamiliar faces there. And I think to a certain degree, it's difficult. It's not taught in schools how to necessarily socialise and be confident and stand up to yourself, stand up for yourself in social situations, and to be yourself. And a lot of the time when I came into secondary school, I didn't really get what a lot of people were speaking about. Should this be about making kind of jokes and off the cuff remarks? I think I was always quite mature in that aspect. I don't know what it was, but I just had there was a disconnect. It kind of felt like what the people were speaking about at the time, the kind of sex jokes and that kind of stuff that the teenagers make. It was there was just a disconnect there. Like I didn't really get it. I think I'm not quite sure why that was. I think I was always brought up in a household where swearing or saying any profanities was pretty strictly banned, and I wouldn't get punished badly for it, but I would definitely get some repercussions. And going into a school where people were swearing pretty blatantly and kind of making these jokes, these offhand remarks, insulting people behind their backs, and sometimes in front of their faces as well, it didn't quite sit right with me. But that was okay, because I still had a group of people from junior school who I got on well with, and I continued those friendships going. And again, sport was still on the side, so I did it quite a lot, and good support system around me as well. And then I kind of progressed through to year 8, and you realise that actually you've got quite a long time ahead of you. I think with the year 11s and stuff like that, and you're seeing them move on, that seems quite cool, and you kind of aspire to be that. But when you got like a year 8, it's a long time, 5 years to be in one school for, and that end point was far. And sometimes when you can see that goal or that final mark ahead of you, it's easier to drive forward. But when it's so distant, when it's so vague, and I know it's a journey, I think that made it a bit more challenging, especially because I hadn't necessarily made too many different friends from the friends that I'd already had previously established. And I think I was quite introverted, for sure. I definitely wasn't extroverted. I definitely wasn't going out some of the parties and stuff like that, which you do when you're younger. I wasn't really invited, didn't really attend many of those. And I think there's a bit of a feeling of isolation, to be honest, especially kind of that age group where you've got your friends, right? And oftentimes you get your family asking how you're getting on at school, etc. You've got your friends, but it was difficult because I didn't necessarily connect on a very like an emotional and a value perspective with my friends. And even this, I know this is saying this, I'm 20 today actually, but saying this
Happy birthday.
Thank you, I appreciate it. But saying this at quite a young age, but I was thinking that at a young age, and I'm not quite sure exactly why that was, but I definitely know that kind of from year 8 onwards, I don't think I was particularly happy in that school. And then got to year 8, and I was wanting to break out of my year group. Never thought about quitting school or anything like that, but just wanted to kind of move on and progress through my life. I think a lot of the content which was studied at school, I seemed to understand it. I was a good kid. I'd always try and do my homework. And I think that a lot, to be honest, came from my family around me wanting me to do well and sitting down and spending the time with me to make sure I progress. So, for instance, even through junior school, I had a French tutor who's a really dear friend today, and maybe she'll be listening. But amazing, really amazing person. Sylvie, she continued teaching me throughout school, and that relationship was nurtured throughout secondary school as well. We're still in contact today. So I think that kind of was instilled in me that I've got to do well. I've got to try and come out, get a good education and move forwards. I think from my dad's perspective, he didn't continue his college. He went straight into the world of work. And I think one of his regrets was not going to university, or potentially not necessarily fulfilling his potential. And I think a lot of people have that potential in them. Some people have to work harder in certain aspects. But yeah, I had that opportunity to really see that from like a holistic perspective and think, okay, I've got to try and push forwards. I've got to put up with this. It's only a couple more years. And then my life really changed fairly quickly. I remember going to North Devon on a holiday, and I think that was at the back end of year 8, and got back from North Devon and continued as normal. Started year 9. Year 9 was nice because at least you got to pick your subjects. I know some schools it's year 7, year 8, year 9, which you're doing kind of lower secondary school, and then you move upper. But I got to at least do the subjects I wanted, speak to the teachers I wanted, and kind of gain stuff that interests me more, that resonates with me. And I mean, in the second half of year 9, so I just turned 14, my mum died of cancer, and that was it was a turning point. It was a very pivotal moment. Not that I saw it at that time like that, but really it was difficult because our house, we'd moved into a flat, so there's 4 people in a flat that was designed really for one person. So it was a very small space. And we were there for kind of 6 months or so. My mum was pretty much, at the time to me, it was unbeknown, but on, I suppose, the deathbed with the oxygen next to her. And I remember just going by, and again, you've got the stuff going on at school. No one's properly connecting with you. You're getting home, and it's quite difficult to see someone in that situation. And I only found out that she'd had cancer after she basically broke out in tears in the car, which was about 2.5 months after her diagnosis. So she was an incredibly strong woman. But it's interesting because I think a lot of that is instilled maybe into me, that I don't necessarily want to be as open and as emotionally honest. I keep myself to myself, which is why this is, and you'll know this, basically the first time I'm saying this. Whether this gets aired or not is still to be decided. But yeah, that was a transformative kind of moment, because I remember getting my uncle come in, waking us really up early in the morning, and I kind of tweaked what could have happened. I remember saying to a friend, because I did football at that time, that my mum was in a end of life. I didn't say end of life at the time. It's called a hospice. Hospice, that's the word. So I said it was in a hospice, and I didn't really realise the meaning of that word. So again, saw her there, and yeah, it's one of those things that my uncle takes me in the morning. Suddenly, everything happens so quickly. You kind of become overwhelmed, and it kind of settles in waves, but that first wave was difficult to take. So get back, family home, and really from there I have to build myself back up. A lot of those opportunities that I had, my dad still wanted me to continue with them, and would have supported it, but it was difficult to do in many regards, just because managing those different aspects. My dad having to work as well. I've got a younger brother. He's a couple of years younger. We get on very well, and he's an amazing person as well. A really, really good heart, and that really transformed that life from really having so many opportunities and doing so much stuff to really being limited in some ways. Never forcefully, but still limited, and having to take on that responsibility of really, I suppose, an extra parent or a carer to my brother, and everything that went from there. So that was difficult. That was really difficult.
So would you say that, obviously you mentioned it was a turning point, would you say that sort of marked the sort of end of your childhood as you saw it, that you had to take on these extra responsibilities? And you touched upon how you've sort of felt disconnected with your peer groups, and sort of on a value-based system. How important was your family and your mother in instilling those values, and how have they carried forward into where you are now today?
Yeah, absolutely. My childhood pretty much finished overnight. At that point, I think it was always building up. I did fundraising days and stuff like that beforehand, to just try and, I suppose that was my way of trying to make it seem less bad if I'm trying to raise a bit of money for charity and help out. But as soon as that happened, that really was, reflecting on it now, my childhood was kind of fizzling out during her illness, especially even year 7, 8, having that disconnect with the people I was speaking to. And really I think that was the switch that really made it difficult. My mum was an absolutely incredible woman. Those opportunities, I wouldn't have received them. I wouldn't be here where I am if it wasn't for her guidance and her values and her mother's principles, which I still carry today with me. But yeah, absolutely, that changed. I had good family around me. I've got a very, very small family, a very small immediate family. And makes it difficult sometimes. I know people have got lots of siblings. You can kind of rely off each other, but obviously very difficult situation for my younger brother as well. So yeah, difficult, challenging, but moved forwards from there really, and was quite discontented. I think I was quite unhappy with how the system was working. I'd obviously still perform well in school, still try to do as much stuff as I could, but yeah, those secondary school years and were tough for sure. And it's only now that, since I've been at university, that like properly starting to find my feet, find my crowd, find my group of people. And college had experienced COVID and all of the challenges that were associated with that, which was difficult because I really wanted to meet people. And I'm sure we'll get on to that a little bit later as well.
So yeah, so I think when sort of understanding a person, obviously, the context is very important, but you're obviously you're president of the Entrepreneur Society. So dealing with all that turbulence, when did your sort of your entrepreneurial journey begin? If you can sort of touch upon that, and
Yeah.
how your childhood motivated you to want to become an entrepreneur and do the things that you're currently doing.
Yeah, good question. It started really quite mid-secondary school when there was competitions we used to hold, Dragon's Den, and I'd always love that. I'd always enjoy, not necessarily at that time, the public speaking aspect, but enjoy that kind of coming up with an idea and pitching it in front of someone. And it's a competition, so you perform and there's prize money up for grabs. So that was really cool. That was always something that I enjoyed. And I suppose from the sporting that I did and the competitions that I did, it was performance and it was showing up and doing the best you could in the moment. So the pitching lent fairly well to me, so I enjoyed that aspect of it. Second aspect of that was that I realised very early that the world was far from perfect. There was lots of stuff which I'd experienced, which I feel like I shouldn't have experienced. And a lot of people, you can ask them, do you have an idea for a business? But really, and they're like, no, I can't think of anything. But really, ideas are absolutely everywhere. Everywhere that they're around you. Any annoyance is a potential business idea. And taking that on board, it was less of a question of I'm going to come up with a business idea, but really trying to suss out what problem do I want to solve? Like, what means enough to me that I'm going to put my time, my effort, my energy to create a result. And obviously, when you're younger, the money's great as well.
Yeah.
So it's always looking for these opportunities. And I used to be on £3.50 an hour, which it was pretty awful even back then. But it's not even that long ago. And I feel like that often put it in relation. Okay, great. I want to be able to earn a bit of money. I want to be able to go into a Starbucks and not feel like I'm paying an hour out of my pocket, but rather just for whatever it is. So, yeah, really how that kind of all came about was I started early, did quite a lot of public speaking competitions, did lots of stuff being in front of other people, and I was like, okay, there's lots of problems around us. I reckon I could try and do something about it. So that really kind of continued through into college, where I had a couple of ideas, had a couple of projects that I was working on, and really wanted to develop out, because I think this is the challenge. It's difficult to know how good, and it's looking at a problem from a few angles. Is it repeatable? Is it a big enough problem? Do people care enough about it? Are people willing to pay for that problem to be solved? There's lots of aspects, and is it something that resonates with me? Do I want to get behind solving that problem? I know this is a bit of a different way of thinking about stuff, but I really have taken the approach on life where if I wasn't alive, would the world be any different? And to me, if it's not, and I haven't got that legacy behind me, there doesn't seem much point in pursuing something. If I'm going to apply for a job, but there's 20 other people trying to do the same thing, what difference, what mark am I really leaving on the world? So the problem aspect and solving problems was important. That was embedded to me quite early. I saw lots of problems, and really through college I was developing, padding out ideas, trying to come up with the next big thing, I suppose. And I'm still trying to come up with the next big thing. Not much has changed, but at the same time, with the Entrepreneur Society, what that is all about doing is bringing people together, people who are like-minded, creating a community, creating an ecosystem, a hub for innovation, a hub for challenging the status quo, and trying to actualize your thoughts. I think a lot of it, and I've said this before, but entrepreneurship as a word, it does put quite a lot of people off because it's a long word and not everyone knows what it means. And I know enterprise is business, you might have that association, but if you break it down, entrepreneurship is two things: ideas and action. And all too many people have ideas. A lot of people have ideas. Ideas are cheap. I don't think there's an original idea out there. To be honest, there's 8 billion people on the planet, so coming up with an original idea is difficult. But what sets people apart is those that take action on their ideas, and something that I've always done in the past is take action and make that step. And I think if you kind of imagine a big space, action, if you've got an idea, you've got to assess. There's a certain part of it where you've got to do your market research. You've got to try and understand if it's an idea worth pursuing. Because otherwise, if you're taking action that's wasted. That could be spent on developing something meaningful and something that's a good use of your time. I think it's Stephen Bartlett that said there was 24 chips in your day, and you basically, if 8 go to sleep, you choose how you spend the rest. And obviously, if you're spending them on something that's going to make you a loss in the long term with regards to your time, there's not much point in doing it. But then obviously you've got to take the idea that failure is sometimes not a complete loss. You can learn from it. So
you just touched on failure, but there, can you recall the first time you remembered yourself like failing, like you've like failed, and then importantly, what was your response to that failure, and how did you improve?
I remember 2 things actually. That just spring up to mind. I mean, I've failed at a lot of stuff. Some job applications, maybe in some ways that I've conducted myself and treated other people. I think that's, to a certain degree, you can always try and reflect. I could have done this better, etc. But properly failed, I didn't really fail too much when I was younger. I always used to do well in my exams. I didn't necessarily mess up too much. I had quite a clear path. The teachers always said that I was doing quite well, but I always remember I wanted to be head boy of my secondary school, and I remember going into the interview and feeling pretty confident. I've got this. I've previously done some charity days, etc. I know a lot of the leadership team. This is me, so I was convinced. And I remember sitting in the room. There was a big room full of people, and they were calling in people to let them know the outcome of their applications. And I'm not sure if they'll be watching, but there was only ever one head girl. Like, it was abundantly clear who that person would be. And essentially what they would do is they divided people, head boy, head girl, head of charities, so the male, female, for every single job role. And we all knew who the head girl was going to be, so everyone wanted to be called out with the head girl. And as soon as that happened, I was like, wow, I'm no longer head boy. So that kind of dawned upon me, but I was like, nah, it's got to be a mistake. It's fine. And again, this was like my mindset at the time. This is what I was thinking, feeling. And I remember going in, and they say, Sean, you've got head of charities. We're delighted to announce it's a fantastic position, etc. And I feel like a pit. I'm like, something's wrong here. I've raised money for charity before, but you're going to put me into that box that I am going to be head of charities just because of that. And it really frustrated me. And I remember going on the journey, and it's crazy how you remember stuff, but went to a piano lesson afterwards. I remember in the car, I was genuinely really struggling with it. I was like, well, I haven't got what I wanted to get in that situation. And that was, I don't think I really had much of a coping mechanism. I think it was denial in the start. Maybe they've made a mistake. What's happened? And then it sinks in, and then you just kind of, I learned to suck it up and get on with it. So that was one of them. And then the other one I always remember quite clearly, I was maybe a bit overconfident going into the situation, but I was staying at a friend's house in Wales. And there was this, yeah, exactly, good old Wales. And so I wanted to get a job in Fleet, Fleet's the town where I'm from, and working at John Lewis, because that's like the place to work. It wasn't, so it's John Lewis and Partners, so it's the Waitrose. And they had these online aptitude tests. And I remember just going through, I was like, oh, this is easy. This is what I do. 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 I get an email, like a few hours after, and I've like speaking to a friend downstairs, speaking to Ellie. Nah, I got this. It's fine. you failed in every aspect of the test, Sean. You won't be. It was like that generic email which everyone gets sent. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not as good as I think that I am, and that was again like a really, really cool learning experience. Not at the time. I was rather frustrated at the time, but as you look back on it, you realize that actually that defines you, and that makes you work harder and try and do something else. And it did work out for me in the end. But really, those were my two early experiences of proper failure that I remember. Obviously, throughout that, I was failing in bits and bobs, but they were like moments that stand out to me.
So you mentioned about mindset, and I know this is a very important aspect for you. So like from those failures, how did your mindset develop? And then tying into that, obviously you mentioned you do a lot of sport, particularly I know running is your sport. So how do those aid you in your professional endeavors?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So mindset is, in my opinion, the single biggest tool, the single biggest asset that everyone has. And people talk about neuroplasticity now, the idea that you can rewire your brain to think in a certain fashion and to make certain decisions. But mindset is pivotal because everyone has their mindset, whether they like it or not. It's Carol Dweck talks about fixed and growth mindset. I can't do something yet, or compared to I'm not good at something, full stop. So it's how you look at situations really and how you bounce back. I used to, and we were talking about failure in the last question, in tennis competitions, I hated tennis competitions. There was no pressure that was put on me. If I didn't perform, that was fine. But I put so much pressure on myself. When I was going to these competitions, I was almost in tears afterwards if I wouldn't perform, if I wouldn't get first, if I wouldn't come in those top three. It wasn't because my dad was putting pressure on me to perform. It was, I was putting on, he's made the trip out. We've taken the time out of our day to do this. If I lose, then I lose. So that was really difficult for me to take. But looking at it from a point of view and zooming out now, it's all about how you respond to those situations. In fact, played quite a bit of tennis here at uni as well. And if I lose a match now, it's all about, being gracious. You've lost. There is no, it's quite funny actually. There is no, I've lost, but I deserve to win. Because if you deserve to win, you would win. Like it's not. So I think holding your hands up and actually picking that you're not perfect, and I'm like very far from perfect, but and I don't want to be perfect. Like that's boring, right? I just want to be at that case where if I face a setback or a challenge, and they come up every single day, there's a new setback, new challenge, new consideration. I just want to feel like I can manage it. It doesn't overwhelm me. I get to that situation where I think everyone wants to be content and everyone wants to be happy, but really, to a certain degree, stress is important. I think stress should be there needs to be stress to be able to make decisions and to be able to perform your best, but not to the point where you're getting burnt out, not to the point where it's becoming overwhelming and you're struggling to enjoy the good times. So, yeah, mindset's important. And really, you mentioned running there as well. So this is, again, quite ironic, I suppose, but I hate running. I absolutely hate it. Like when I started running, I used to do cross country when I was younger, and it kind of, when I say when I was younger, that doesn't really define who I am now, but picked up running a few years back. And I did it because it was COVID and the lockdowns and I couldn't go to the gym. So I used to run instead. Used to go around the block and stuff, and you do a certain distance, you get back, brilliant. You've done your workout, fine. You can do whatever you want afterwards. And running was, I just found it dull. I found it monotonous. It's step. I didn't have any music at the time. So I did it. I did it because I knew it was good for you. And at that point, I knew that it's a bit like a balance, right? I knew that I would overly, from looking at it from a perspective, I'd be more comfortable if I did do the running, because this discomfort that I experience while I'm doing the running is outweighed by the discomfort I would experience if I just didn't do any exercise for the day and it would be playing on my mind. So I did it anyway, went ahead and did it. And my dad did a couple of half marathons as well. And I was watching, and that always seemed quite cool. So I wanted to get up to that level. And now I run pretty much every single day. I do it fairly religiously. I wake up at 5 a.m. or 4:59 a.m., which is just to get that extra head start over the people. It's also psychological pain as well. Seeing the 4 on your clock in the morning makes it, you really want to stop. But Tuesday, last Friday, I did 50k, and I didn't plan to do 50k. I just, in the afternoon, I was like, I've got some time now. I'm just gonna run and do it. And from what seems so hard at the beginning to what it seems like now is amazing. And I think that's really because my mindset and seeing problems as opportunities to grow and learn is really transformed over time. But mindset is, I can't stress it enough, it's how you look at issues, which really does define you. The issues don't define you, but it's how you respond to them, which do.
Well, I agree 100%. My mindset is pivotal to everything. So looking at your journey now, so we touched upon your childhood, sort of those secondary years, and in college as well. So now you're in college, you're looking to pick a university. How did Exeter University come about, and what was the sort of considerations that you thought of before choosing Exeter University?
Yeah, good question. I wanted to get away from home, not because of, I think it's just, I've grown up in the same area for such a long time. I need to break away. I need to be in a place where no one knows who I am, because I've got to forge my own path. I didn't like the fact that I was, again, quite shy when I was younger. I didn't like the fact that the person I was, how I was perceived by other people, and I just wanted to change that. So finding a place that's far from home was on my priority, which I realise Exeter's ironically not that far from where I am living. But I looked at different universities, did some research. I never really considered so much an apprenticeship or anything like that. I think I did it at certain points, but I think it was with my dad. He didn't go to university, and it just seemed like a natural progression for me to continue to study. But at the same time, I wanted to be in a group where I actually properly get to meet people, and a lot of people had that chance when they are at college. They make friends for life, but I never really properly saw that. So yeah, looked at universities, went to 4 out of 5. Didn't go to Durham because it was a bit too far, but went to, I think it was Exeter, Nottingham, Warwick and Bath. And Exeter was the first uni I visited. Just fell in love with it. Literally the first time I was there, I get a gut feeling, and your gut maybe is like your second brain, but for me, every single poor decision I've made has been because I've ignored my gut. So if I get a gut feeling about something, I trust it implicitly. And when I was in Exeter, it was really nice. It was green. I absolutely love being outdoors. I can't stand being in a car or public transport or stuff like that. I just love being outdoors in the greenery and nature, and that was fantastic. I could walk into the city, and it was a good course. It seemed like a nice location. My granddad lives down in Paynton, so that's not too far away. So I think it all kind of aligned in the end, and fortunately I was able to get my first choice and come here. And I think it's amazing when you look about it and you realise how pivotal that decision is in defining you, what you do, again, how your life shapes. But you make that decision, you look back, and in this case, this is a decision I'm very grateful for having chosen.
Okay, so you've chosen the university. Obviously, you have the summer before. It gets to September, you get dropped off, and then you're on your own. So can you sort of take me through what those sort of first initial feelings were like? Just sort of you're on your own now in university, and sort of take me through.
Yeah, it was really difficult. Completely honestly, it was. I think this was an actual turning point, like a big turning point in my life, because I remember I got dropped off quite late. This was on a Sunday, if I'm correct, and again, new surroundings. I'd only visited once before. And it was my uncle and my auntie who took me because my dad had COVID. So I went down in the car with them, had all of my stuff in the back. And I really got there. And it was quite late. It got dark at that point. And I went up to my room, which I'd suddenly dawned on me that I would be sleeping in for like the next year. I haven't even seen how it looked, because when during COVID, it was difficult to be able to go around and actually see places. So I'd only done my research looking online, and I was in La Frauda. Any other fellow extra grads or students are watching, and I was in my room and I was unpacking the stuff, and no one else was there. As a lot of them had gone clubbing or had gone out in the evening. And I think even at the start, I was looking at stuff like, I could never imagine clubbing was going to be particularly for me, but I was looking at these tickets to try and conform and fit in and meet people. And at the start, I think it's important to do that. But obviously, because I got there quite late, I remember feeling so isolated and so alone, because I was in that room, I'd had all of my stuff, I've now set myself up for the next year, didn't particularly get on well in secondary school. College was all right, but again, didn't really meet many new people, make too many new friends. So I was there and I was like, okay, is this how this whole year is going to shape up? And then the next year, and then the next year, I've got to do something. So I go into town, I meet my uncle and auntie. On the way down, I remember there's two people who are walking, and it turns out they're third years. But I'm at that point, I think this is the whole balance scale coming back to it. The doing inaction or not doing anything and just walking into town would have been more overall uncomfortable for me than going up to some random strangers, introducing myself and speaking to them. So I spoke to these two people, and suddenly, I mean, humans with social creatures, and I just felt so much better. They were third years, but I was super open, super honest, really friendly, and I think they liked that. So I got back, slept in my room, woke up in the morning feeling awful again. Every single person on every side of me, I didn't even know like who they were. They all kind of knew each other a little bit, but I didn't know any of them. So I got out of my room and I said, Sean, you've got a choice. You have got a choice. You choose how you act, which will define the future years to come. And I made the choice, and it was quite a simple choice to make looking at it. I'm going to go up to people, I'm going to speak to them, and I'm going to try and make the most of this experience, make the most of this opportunity, because not everyone has the opportunity to be able to come to university, so I might as well make the most of it. So that day, I think I spoke to about 6, 7 completely random strangers who were just walking by themselves. I was walking around the uni, I was exploring, and I'd just go up and introduce myself, which to a lot of people, even to me now, seems quite daunting, just going up to a random person and being fairly open, honest, transparent. And I just said, hi, I'm Sean, I'm a first year, and I don't really know this aspect. Do you have any idea on how to get to this place? I already knew where the place was, but you know what I mean? It's a conversation. Icebreaker for sure. And maybe they didn't, and then would walk up together and try and find it. But that was really cool, because I didn't necessarily meet people that was aligned to what I was thinking and straight away. But I met and I had a conversation with people, and that was really interesting in itself, because that was the first time I feel like I've properly gone out and actually had a proper conversation with someone who's different, from a different walk of life, different background, different setting. And I've just found it so cool, even at that point where people would come from such different walks of life, different places in the world, but we were speaking to each other in that exact same moment at that time. So I learned a lot, and yeah, for me, that uni was, the adjustment period was very difficult, but societies were the number one thing for me. I knew straight away going into it. I don't drink, so that was kind of a bit of a challenge going in, because there is a bit of a drinking culture at uni. And I actually remember coming into my flat, the main area in our flat, and maybe looking back at it, I should have been a bit more cautious. But I came in like a zip fleece, some jeans, nothing's too stylish, very boring, like old man kind of style.
Yeah.
And I was like, to be honest, I am a little bit of an old man in everything that I do, so why not like actually be, like, own it, do you know what I mean? Like actually be myself. So adjustment was one of those things that it obviously took time. I met a couple of fantastic people quite early on in the year, which I'm still really good friends with now, which really helps. But yeah, just throwing myself into the opportunities really did make the difference.
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of a theme with like that sort of social isolation and like finding your group. So can you remember the moment where you were like, no, this is my people. I finally found my group. And yeah.
I can, yeah. So I feel like even before, I've never been like a massive group person in the sense that I've always been a little bit on the introverted side, more so when I was a bit younger. And so I think connecting with a lot of people I found quite difficult, because even in a group setting, unless you get to speak to each person one-on-one, it takes time to build up a relationship or a rapport with someone. So I remember doing calisthenics. Again, it just seemed an awesome society to join. It was free. It was a good group of people, and I turned up to the event. And I meet a guy called Sana, and he's like incredibly strong. But we just, the jokes he was making and the jokes we were cracking, we were just both in stitches. We were laughing so much, and a lot of the other people weren't laughing, which it kind of made it a little bit more funny that we had the exact same sense of humor. So we linked up afterwards, and I think we just exchanged numbers or whatever it was. And we said, let's do something later in the week. And at the time, I did a couple of other bits as well. So I had a couple of, I don't really call them friends, more kind of acquaintances at that point, because you don't probably get to know them. But a couple of people who I at least knew the names of, knew the faces of. So obviously in the first week, and I wasn't particularly close to my flatmates and didn't really have that connection. Fine, nice people, but there was never that kind of link between us, even when I was actively searching for it. So yeah, essentially went out. I remember Freshers Fair on Friday, which was a funny experience, because this is where I see Sana again for the second time, and we're going around the stalls, and yeah, just having a good laugh. There's a society for everything. I'm not going to mention some of the more interesting societies, just in case they are listening or someone who knows them is. But there's a society for every single person you can imagine.
Well, I will. There's a Quidditch society.
Is there?
Yeah.
There's
There's a Taylor Swift society.
no,
Please,
Taylor
please,
Swift.
please don't come at me, the Taylor Swift fans.
Yeah, no, I remember. Well, now you said it, it opens up the stage for me. I
Firing
remember
line.
going round and what was it? There's a Rubik's Cube society, Rubik's Cubes are cool. Once you solved it,
I can't imagine that there's much more.
And then because what we set ourselves the challenge is we just wanted to collect as, you get freebies and that sort of stuff. So that was what we set out to do. And the next stall was the Rethinking Society. And to be honest, Lewis, I was rethinking having the conversation with them. It was long. All I wanted was a sticker, and I got a spiel on, what was it, communism or something like that. So that was entertaining. Then the go-karting society, and I was like, this has got to be for me. And they wanted, was it like 40 quid or something? Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I was like, do you want an arm and a leg with that? But yeah, so that was good. It was going around the different stalls. But the most interesting society I've seen is the Toucan Appreciation Society. Shout out to those that appreciate toucan, because when someone said they got the Toucan Appreciation Society, I said, for a second there, I thought you meant like the Toucan Appreciation Society.
What, like J.R. like Tolkien?
Yeah, no, not the token, the toucan.
Oh,
like with the beaks.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I said, for a second there, I thought you said the Toucan Appreciation Society, and they did. So I'm not sure, they don't actually go out and see the birds, but...
Oh, anyway. so it's not for the person who wrote Lord of the Rings?
No.
It's for a bird? Yeah. They let anyone make a society.
They do, yeah. Exactly. It's crazy. Yeah. Crazy what this world's coming to, but yeah, interesting.
So you've sort of like, you said you met Sana and got your feet. What? And then so you join Extra Entrepreneurs, which is the society the way involved in.
Yeah.
And then you're somehow first year that goes to vice president. So can you sort of explain to me sort of how you heard of Entrepreneur Society, and then sort of what that sort of progression was to a leadership role as a fresher?
Sure. yeah, some people were like, Sean, isn't it illegal to be on committee in your first year? And I get that. I get that point. It's quite early, but I joined about 8 societies in my first year, all different societies doing all different stuff. And entrepreneurs was one that I was kind of interested in. I was interested in, so I still have a company, and to me, I thought that kind of put me ahead of a few people. So, which again is naive to say now, but I kind of figured, okay, maybe I am an entrepreneur. I always kind of had that background. I have like a book of like 100 business ideas. Some will be as successful as an underwater hairdryer, but others, like, actually there might be something there. So I'd always coming up with ideas. So I thought, okay, this might be a society for me. Went to a few of their events. It was decent. It was nice to be in a group of people who wanted to create change, who were maybe, I think entrepreneurs, it's definitely come into fashion recently, but it's not necessarily the outliers, it's the people who really wanted to make change. So that appealed to me. There was a position that came up, VP, in January of my first year, and I thought, why not? And I've actually had that mentality for quite a long time. Is I'm still not great at saying no to stuff, but at that point in time, it just seemed like a cool opportunity, and I thought, why not? I've got a bit of background, bit of history. I've done some events like that before. I could just get stuck in, so did an application, and got voted in for it, which was cool. And yeah, just kind of went from there really. But yeah, so it was just right time, right place. A bit of luck maybe involved as well, which is really important. I think that like timing plays a key aspect in stuff. Obviously, the more stuff you expose yourself to, you can kind of greaten your chances of being luckier. But yeah, it was just right time, right place.
So you mentioned about like opportunities and joining 8 societies. That's a hell of a time commitment. And for those who don't know, who don't follow on LinkedIn, I think you have at the minute 15 active roles. Am I correct in saying 15?
Yeah, a lot. I haven't done a count.
So
yeah.
And you mentioned earlier about stress. So
Yeah.
how do you manage that work-life balance? And were there moments where that you haven't been able to manage and you just sort of it's all gone to pot per se?
It's a difficult one. I think it's actually really difficult for me to say no to stuff, and it's got to the point where I kind of sign myself up to so much because I feel like, oh, I'm missing out on an opportunity if I don't. But then you can also now see it, and I look at it and I'm like, well, actually, sometimes it's smarter not to do. It's to focus on the stuff and do it well. And I there's always that balance between me is doing the stuff that I do, but doing it well, and just trying to spread myself too thin because it looks like I've got lots of positions and stuff like that. And I would say that really I try and tie everything I can together. A lot of the stuff that I do is focused on entrepreneurship and Actus, which is like a social entrepreneurship society, so not-for-profit businesses which are run by students. Google Developer Student Clubs, which is again about bridging the gap between theory and practice, in this case for student developers. So I just try and link everything I can together and just try to be as efficient. I have like a switch on, switch off time, which again I'm not great at sticking to, and I'm far from perfect. But what I try and do is I try and prioritize. And if I'm putting myself in situations where I am the sticking point, if something doesn't work, it's on me. That is a priority because I want to make sure I get that fixed so that other people have the freedom to be able to move and get the stuff that they need to get done. So it's very difficult. There's a lot of stuff to manage, and to be honest, especially in my first year, even second year, I didn't really have much of what you call a social life. I didn't particularly go out in evenings. I would spend a lot of time working. I used to work on Saturday and on Sunday as a swim teacher. So that's a lot because obviously you're working on your course during the week, plus you've got the extra stuff, plus you've got Saturday and Sunday. And what I would say is, for anyone listening, it's don't just take up stuff for the sake of taking up stuff. Focus on what you want to do and just try and spend the time and do it well. At the end of the day, if you've got too much going on, it's not. There's a quote which I absolutely love, and it resonates so much. Is burnout's not doing too much; it's just doing too little of the stuff you actually want to do. And last February, I hit really bad burnout, and I kind of burnout is not really a do you know what I mean? Just get over it. Do you know, like do your stuff, just get a good night's sleep, and then move on with it the next day. But it got to the point where I had to go into hospital and I had to get a chest X-ray, all interconnected. I was getting hardly any sleep, and this is what I hate. Like nowadays, it's often seen as kind of like fashionable to we live that 24/7 lifestyle, to not particular to just drive and try and do too much work. But to me, that's and how I've seen it anyway. That's been a fundamental weakness in what I've been doing. Is just that, just trying to keep stuff doing and not knowing my own limits. And I think at the end of the day, you're living on this world. You've been like blessed to have a life ahead of you. There's no guarantee to say you're not going to wake up next day and get hit by a bus. And I know that's ominous, but at the same time, if you come in with that mindset, then you've got to try and make the most. Carpe diem, which is seize the day, and that's something that I've really taken to heart in these recent few months, and just try to make sure there's at least one part of the day where I can look back on and actually remember that was a highlight. I remember today I went out for lunch with a group of lads. That was brilliant, and doing this now, and then got a party later. And these are days I'll look back and I'll be like, great. Even other days where there's not so much going on, I went for a really nice walk, or I got to speak to a family member I hadn't spoken to in a while. To me, it's important to work those into the day and give them just as much priority as the things that you need to do for work purposes. People talk about work-life balance. To me, it's a silly concept. It's not a balance. Work is not the opposite of life. You've got to try and find something where they can align in some aspects. Work is part of your life. It falls underneath. Part of your life as well is socializing, building relationships, speaking to people, making the most of everything. And you've got to, I think, take a step back. And in my situation, I had to take a step back, look at the stuff that I'm doing, realize that, Sean, you're not like no one, truly no one properly cares about all of the stuff you're doing. That's more for yourself. That's more for maybe your ego or whatever it is you're trying to please internally. Just what I want to do now is I want to make a difference. And I know this is maybe a cliche, but I specifically told about this earlier, making my mark or leaving my legacy. And I've done a lot of goal setting. And part of the goal setting, you can divide it out into like relationship goals, friends, family, and then you could divide that down into career, personal development, hobbies and interests. But the other thing is legacy, and legacy has always been important to me. So very interested in social impact, social entrepreneurship as a concept. And if something doesn't align with what I'm interested in and what I want to go down the path, why am I doing it? If I want to make money from it to be able to facilitate something, maybe that's justifiable. But apart from that, it's just reassessing, reframing, which is something I talked about as well before. But really just taking that step back. Is it worthwhile? Is it a good use of my time? Because, yeah, I mean, memento mori, is that the saying? Something like that, yeah. You've got your soul on this earth, so make sure you're making best use of what you've got.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good sentiment, especially since, like, well, you're only turning 20 today, so I think, yeah, that's really good. In terms of, you mentioned, you touched on actors there and Google developers, student clubs, obviously along with Entrepreneur Society, being president of all three of these societies. How do you approach leadership? And what are the sort of your main learnings from taking up these leadership roles?
My main learnings are, in order to lead a team, you've got to have a vision. If you don't have a vision, you can't have something that people can get behind. You've got to be able to, the biggest soft skill, in my opinion, the most important soft skill to have is communication. Good communication is everything, because if you can communicate with someone in good times or bad times, and create that environment where even if it is bad times and someone can't do the work, that they just communicate it with you, and that's fine, that's okay. We all go through periods in our life that are tougher than others. If you can create I suppose, an environment that really fosters people being genuinely themselves, that's got to be like a fundamental which you put in place. Once you've got that and you pair that with the vision, so people have now the ability and the confidence to act and the direction to act in, once you've got those two aspects, it actually becomes a lot easier. And getting to know people on an individual level is something that I've learned is very important. Everyone has different principles, like values, stuff that actually makes them tick. Why do they show up every single day? Why are they even part of the society? Why are they in this particular role in the first place? And when you can start to understand those and start to get a sense for the person, I think that you can talk about like individualism versus collectivism. And I think you've got to treat people as individuals, but at the same time, you've got to remove yourself. I mean, entrepreneurs, we're 15 on committee now, so it's quite a big team of people. And if you've got that vision direction, and you've got to trust other people as well, and that's really difficult for me, like having to not give up control, but when I do something, at least I can know that I'm going to do it to a standard that I'm happy with. But sometimes when you put something in someone else's hands, it's difficult to tell because it's out of your control. And I'm not a control freak, but I'd like to have that stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like you can kind of assign and allocate. And when something's out of your control, I've realised to become okay with that, comfortable with that, and accept it and encourage it now. And this is why I take great pride in these teams, these societies, because I think the people who we have are the best people. They are really, really cool. And it's those people really, and having that trust and that faith that they are going to do the right thing in the best interests of the society is what makes all of the difference. And you knowing that as a leader, that will communicate naturally out to everyone else. So really, vision and empowering people to make decisions are the two most important things. And obviously being able to delegate tasks. There's lots of other stuff, but it's the communication, but being honest, being transparent. If you've got a decision, but you've already made up your mind, don't pose it as if it's like an option. If like there's another one where it's like, if you want to kind of head in a certain direction, and you've got everyone around you to potentially go in that direction, you change your mind or you switch focus or whatever it is you do, or you make a mistake, you hold your hands up and you say, I made a mistake. You would have heard me do this before. And also, if you've got to break bad news, because you've always got to break bad news to people, whatever it is, there's a quote from, I think it's Moneyball, where it's like, would you rather take a bullet to the head or 3 to the chest? I think you've got to be fairly honest with people, and and if you're honest with people, they will be honest with you. And you've got to show some element of vulnerability, that you know that you're not perfect and you're willing to take feedback on board. And you're not just willing, but you will action the feedback taken on board.
I definitely, obviously, being someone who's worked with you, that leadership style, that worked perfect for me. You know, I'm quite similar to you, quite a straight shooter. So I think that is important, and definitely you see it sometimes. People will try beat around the bush or try give an excuse. I'm just a person who likes to go from, right, let's go direct, which is the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in terms of obviously back to entrepreneurship being ideas and action, one idea that you have taken action on, and is, you know, for the last 3 years, is Check It Plus. So could you tell me a bit about the where you started from, where the idea came from, you know, what you've gone through, some of the learning experiences that you've had, and the extrapolations for the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I suppose apart from kind of eBay and as a little bit of a side hustle, Check It Plus was the first business, I suppose you could say I was seriously invested in. It started because I saw my grandmother fall victim to some kind of online scams. You get the phishing, that kind of stuff, and just being fairly vulnerable. And I thought, well, there's not a solution out there where you could just have that absolute trust, where you make a phone call, and the idea was a phone call at the time, and you speak to someone, and they help you make the best decision online. So that was really split into two aspects. And this coincided with COVID, where people were quite price sensitive and wanted to find the best price for stuff online, understandably, especially if they didn't have their income coming in. So I set about to create a platform which delivers two services. One of those aspects is the price checker, to target those people who are looking for that best bargain, and I was always one of those people. And the product selector, which is for people who have an idea of something that they want to purchase, and they can enter as much information as they want about what they're looking to buy, and someone will find them the product that best matches their requirements, like an online personal shopper. That was an extremely slow elevator pitch. Apologies for that, but really, it's two core aspects. And the product selector, really, I kind of lost some energy in it. It takes a lot of time to develop something, even what they term in business a minimal viable product. Like even the simplest version of it still took a little bit of time to do. Although looking back on it, it could have been way simpler. It could have literally just been someone says what they want, literally just put it into a form, and then I do all the research and just literally send them the thing that matches their requirements. So you kind of look back, and I've made so many learners. I could almost do a podcast about all of my failures and Check It Plus, so essentially there was that. And then the product selector, I really wanted to focus on making an impact, specifically looking at eco-friendly small and local businesses and trying to support those, because it was check it. So it was checking the prices. That was where it started first. And I realized that actually what you're doing is, in some senses, disadvantages those that can't compete on price, but maybe have good credentials. So that was my way of making up for the price checker plus product selector. So that's really where that idea come about from. I mean, I'm not sure necessarily if that's, and this has been totally transparent, that's my destiny. I don't think it is. I think it's definitely more of a learning experience more than anything else. But what I have taken away from that, and I suppose a piece of business advice and a piece of non-business advice. Piece of business advice, don't be afraid to forge your own path and forge your own path. So what I mean by that is, if I'm targeting 1 million people, I actually figured, and this is the counterintuitive nature of business, that if I targeted 100 people, that would be a lot better than that 1 million in this case, because how I'm targeting my marketing, how I'm targeting the proposition, the value those customers would be getting, can be a lot more focused and lead to higher satisfaction and lead to high use of the service. So that was a key kind of learning, that sometimes don't go too big, start out small. They say as a founder, do stuff that doesn't scale. So don't try and create a multi-million-pound business before a multi-million-pound business. You've got to start small. My non-business learning was that it is extremely difficult. It is, when I say extremely difficult, that's not to discourage people from trying it. I think it's important that people do go ahead and try it, and I'm far from successful in that aspect. But what I would say is, you've got to stick with it. A lot of the times, and this goes back to the ideas and the action piece, a lot of people know what they need to do. I truly believe that oftentimes people do know what they need to do. If you hire a PT, you know you want to become fitter, right? You know you got to turn up at the gym. It's not a secret. If I want to start a business, you know you got to put in the hours. But the problem is, and this is the one piece of thing I would say to people, you've got to have the capacity to be able to put in the hours. But you've got to be honest with yourself. If you truly, truly want it enough, you're going to tip the scales where you do take the action. But oftentimes it's like a nice to have, or it would be nice to do that at some point. And I won't speak too much about my brother. My brother's gone down a very different path that I have, away from university. But if you create ways, and I'm not necessarily advocating for this, where failure is not as much of an option, that's going to motivate you even more to tip the scales in your balance. So sometimes I think it's about being honest with yourself, especially when you are trying to start something at the beginning, and just think, I can have an idea, but I've got to put in the hours. So many people come to me and say, Sean, I've got this idea. And I say, what they described to me, I say, brilliant. But it's literally already out there. There's a business doing it. They haven't even bothered to go out and just do the research and pad it out before they speak to someone. So, and that's important as well.
I think that there's and from my experience as well, like people romanticize about the idea, having a business, that's what I'm gonna do, without actually understanding the mechanisms that underpin running a business. And I think, in a way, the level of effort you have to put into a business, or in a lot of cases, it's not just one business. You'll have one successful business, but 3 failures behind that. I think it's just, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And I think that there's that barrier to entry, in an essence, is good, because it weeds out the people who would like to have it, and the people who really, really want it. So yeah, in your case, that's definitely, you're definitely on the other side. But
yeah.
in terms of, I know you mentioned about Enactus and sort of a social enterprise. You maybe go into India this summer. So
Yeah.
you explain, from, obviously you mentioned legacy, like how important is sort of social entrepreneurship, and where do you see yourself going in terms of that avenue?
Good question. I would say I don't know, quite honestly. And what I do is I'm very fortunate to be able to speak to a lot of people and ask them, how did they forge their journey? How did that look for them? And a lot of times people fall into stuff, or it's not mapped out at the beginning. It's not necessarily set in stone. Sometimes there is that clear trajectory, but I've come to realize and be okay with the fact that I don't know. And I think a lot of people, especially young people, don't know, and that's fine. But realize the more you keep doing, even if you do something that you don't enjoy, at least you know that you're not enjoying that, and you're not going to spend your whole, we talk about like a career and jobs, but people change their jobs so often now. You're not tied down like the way you were traditionally perceived to be. So what I would say is, with social entrepreneurship, very open-minded with regards to any opportunities I can get stuck in and learn more. I got to travel to Uganda last year, which was a really cool experience, and really understand different cultures. That's something that fascinates me. Different cultures, how people act, how people operate. I find that I could speak about it for ages, just through speaking to other people and understanding how they act and how their systems work in their country and how their values look. But what I would say with the social entrepreneurship, I think my path is going to be keep doing what I'm doing. Enactus Exeter has 6 social enterprises covering a huge variety. And the difference between a charity and a social enterprise is sustainable. So if I want to be doing something, I want to be doing something that can continue and kind of stand on its own 2 feet without being reliant on, I don't know, grants or donations or something like that. So I would say that for me, what's next is to continue with the stuff that I'm doing. I'm looking to start another society as well, Iron Fit Society, and really just see any ways I can to try and empower people to do, because I think a lot of it is intrinsic, a lot of it is internal. People have an idea or people do want to make change. It's just trying to unlock that in some cases, or just extra bit of motivation to get people to take that step forward. So as you probably gauge from that answer, I'm not too sure, but definitely focusing on social and working with people, because I enjoy working with people, speaking with people, and helping wherever I can. So
You mentioned the Iron Fit Society. I know that you have an Ironman in Paris booked this year, and 100k is a 100k marathon. So, like, speak to me about how's the training going, and uh, where are you in terms of the sort of the mental aspect? Obviously, the physical aspect, you know, you can run, but in terms of, I think what's going to be the biggest challenge is that mental aspect. So, how are you preparing for that, and what's your training looking like?
good question. I would say so. Yeah, Iron Fit is again trying to really pair the physical with the mental, because you need to have both of those in synergy or in working well together to be able to really bring about meaningful positive change in your life. So Ironman Nice is June 16th this year, and that will be a great achievement. I saw of it as I think I read about it in a book or something like that, as like a feat, and I'm always looking for the next thing to accomplish and tick off a bucket list or whatever. So that just seemed like a cool opportunity. Yes, there's the mental side, there's the physical side, but I'll be completely honest. I think, and I'm confident, even though I haven't done one before, I'm confident that I'll be able to do it. The reason I'm confident that I'll be able to do it is because I'm confident that I'll be able to do it. And if you like really think about that and break that down, I've got a lot of inner self-belief, and I realise that the fact that will limit me won't be the fact that I haven't done enough training, because I will get to that point. It will only be up here, and I'm not travelling all the way to Nice for a 15-hour trip to give up. So yeah, Ironman, and then 100k after that, and who knows, 100 miles potentially to follow. So yeah, stay tuned.
Well, I think it's going back to the famous quote, I think therefore I am, and I think you touched upon it there. Like, your mindset is that you're gonna do it, you're gonna complete it. Chances are you will, unless something goes terribly wrong, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that was a very insightful conversation. As you mentioned, there's not a new idea. So in keeping with that theme, I'm going to steal Stephen Bartlett's tradition from Diary of a CEO. In you have to ask a question for our next guest. So is there a question that we can ask to our next guest?
I would like to ask the next guest, at what point in their life did they feel their happiest? And do they ever feel like they will get to the point in their life now where they are happier than they once were?
A very good question. Well, Sean, thanks for coming and sitting down.
Pleasure.
And yeah, that was amazing.
Excellent.
Bye,
Cheers,
guys.
Lewis.
We'll see you next time.